moment you delegate, you're almost like an octopus. You've got so many other people, so many other elements and skill sets coming that the job of success gets divided, but the job, whenever failure comes to you, it also gets divided. Financial capital is like fuel in a car. Intellectual and social capital, which is why you really want these people, is like the body and engine of the car. And the body and engine rarely changes. To ask them, what would you change in this organization of ours? Go that far, it's okay यार, दो तीन गालियाँ दे देंगे आपको, they'll tell you things you don't want to hear. नीचे पड़ा हुआ है means boost your ads, promote on Amazon. Same thing, increase your shelving to eye level is boosting on Amazon.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Ground Zero podcast. Today we have with us Mr. Sanil Sacha, founding partner at Huddle. Sanil co-founded Huddle, a sector-agnostic accelerator that focuses on revenue strategy and growth for startups. As an investor, he has provided early-stage funding and strategic support to companies across sectors such as sports, media, arts, deep tech, and CPG. He's been an entrepreneur before for a global sports brand, and he's also been a national best-selling author for 4 books, mentor to upcoming writers, and has been recognized internationally for his contributions to literature. Hi Sanil, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
For today, we'll talk in detail about the 0 to 1 journey of consumer brands and uncover some invaluable insights and learnings when building early. And we'll broadly divide the conversation into 4 parts. First, we'll set some context for the audience and talk about the founder mindset when building early. Further, we'll divide the brand building journey into 3 parts. We'll talk about pre-sales, sales, and post-sales, and we'll deep dive into each of these and touching upon multiple nuances of building at this stage. Excited to have this conversation with you, Sanil. Let's get this started.
Sure. Excited as well and daunting in some ways. It almost feels like a test.
Yeah. No, it's just like a conversation. Like you just have to speak your mind, right? So I understand that before coming to an accelerator, the entrepreneur should have a ready product and some market validation in terms of sales. Talk to us about this 9 to 12 month journey before an entrepreneur comes to you or say a typical accelerator. And what are these challenges that they face during this time? How do they handle things like market research, product testing, vendor support, just market launch, etc.?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot to cover in what you've asked, and if we just remove the accelerator out of it to begin with, right, or the journey of before a startup needs to accelerate itself, it has to first and foremost have a team that is available at all times to take care of the life of a startup. Now, let me break that up a little more. I think first and foremost, we always talk about the founder mindset. You mentioned the same term. What is a founder mindset? The most exciting part about being a founder is that there's no certainty.
Yeah.
There is, it's like a roller coaster. It's exciting, it's scary. Very rarely do plans go your way. Failure to aate hi jayega. So that's the first important part to really know, that how do you have a team that is, whether they are founders of the company or not, do they have the founder's mindset? Now, in order to do that, you have to create ownership. Creating ownership is not only about giving equity. It's very important. I think equity is incredibly important for teams to create in the form of employee stock options. But over and above that, delegation, which only comes when you have trust, is the biggest strength that can be played by a founder when they have trust in their team and they delegate the team in the early days. Because the moment you delegate, if let's say we're talking about a team with a one founder capability, that's typically a founder, 2 arms to be able to get the job done. But the moment you delegate, you're almost like an octopus.
Yeah.
You've got so many other people, so many other elements and skill sets coming that the job of success gets divided, but the job, whenever failure comes to you, it also gets divided. So the burden is divided and it's shared. That's the first most important bit that we like to see in a team uh, before we can join their journey.
Yeah.
Now, what comes after that, right? We have to understand that why are they creating the problem that they're going after? Which problem are they going after? Um, and why are they doing it? So there's a big question that we always like asking. Why are you solving? You know, let me take an example. When when a team of ours that builds wellness foods, wellness oriented foods for people with diabetes and cholesterol, it's a company called Wellversed. When they started a company called KetoFi, I still remember a very interesting journey and conversation with Anand, who's the founder over there, and said, "Why are you doing this? Like, why are you trying to cater to the lives of diabetics? A very noble cause, a very large problem. Unfortunately, we are the diabetes center of the world." Um, and his answer was so deep rooted to his obsession to cater to the problem that in my mind, it was inevitable that ये करके ही रहेगा. Whether he does it through this route or that route, his why. That's a book, right? I think it's called Start with Why.
Start with Why.
Simon Sinek,
Yeah.
right? There's a reason this whole why is concentrated on, because the why cannot, at least in my observation, it can't be because of a want. It's your need. If your problem you're going after is you obsess over it, your reasons to do it are slightly stronger than others. Very philosophical, but that's true in my observation. Then when you look at a founder who's building their first fundamentals, right? We've spoken about the team, the founder mindset, that is the team. We've spoken about the why. Now we figure out the first route. Have they done their research, right? I think you mentioned market research as well. I think first and foremost, they have to figure out how am I going to get my first set of sales, and then how do I ensure that this customer completely becomes a repeatable customer. There are two ways of growth. One is we take this bottle of water and we say we'll make the most of this water, and we spread it all over the table and we say we still have this water with us. Or we find a glass and we pour it deep and we say now this water, we have control over this water. I choose the latter. I think majority of us will choose the latter.
Yeah.
And that means that's the analogy, a very bad analogy, but an analogy of how you create repeatable users. Go deep. Once you figure out how to create depth, then you figure out your serviceable audience. So SAM bol do, your targetable audience, TAM bol do, jo bhi bolna hai. First figure out your accuracy. And I think these are first fundamentals. Before I pause, I think another big part is when a team is coming out to first build, get stakeholders, shareholders, be it a fund, early stage fund like us, who comes in practically as the first check, plays the role of an accelerator, gets involved. They need to figure out why do they even want these partners. Chalo, the simple answer is paise chahiye, we have to raise. And that's fine. Of course, you need capital. It is fuel. But again, what we've noticed repeatedly, fortunately been a part, and with some great founders, some good friends who we've built businesses with, we've realized that financial capital is like fuel in a car. Intellectual and social capital, which is why you really want these people, is like the body and engine of the car. And the body and engine rarely changes.
Yeah.
The fuel can keep coming. So we have to be very mindful that if I want Huddle or anyone else who does a great job out there, and there are many friends of mine in this ecosystem who are doing a phenomenal job in enabling startups, utilize their strength beyond the capital that is financial. And for that, you have to figure out what are you second best at, and then go out.
No, amazing. So you talked about in founders mindset and challenges. You basically talked about setting up a team first. I think team is very important. Do you look at like 2-3 co-founders in a team, or is it just one founder but a strong need? Like is Is
Yeah,
that
that's
something really?
it's a really good
Yeah.
question. And it's, you know, I think I can create a case in point for both.
Okay.
But I'm not going to play a diplomat here.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be diplomatic in saying
Yeah.
this. I think for me, my experience as a founder, I built, fortunately, I have a brilliant team at Huddle,
Yeah.
and I started it with a co-founder.
Yeah.
It was easier doing it. it, do I feel this journey could have been built without my co-founder Ishan? No, no way. In fact, there's no way it could have been built. Why that is because you have to figure out who complements your weakness, and do you add a strength to their weakness, and can you learn from their strength over time, not to replace but to be further enabled, right? Call it the terminology becoming a transformer, for that matter. The other part is, before we get to three co-founders, four co-founders, I've seen as much as six co-founders.
Yeah.
As a scenario, and we don't have, I've evaluated, but single co-founders, we've got single co-founders who do a really good job.
Okay.
The only question that I have, because I've never been a single co-founder, right? And there's no right or wrong in it. मेरे ख्याल से the journey is very, it's a mental game.
Mental game. Yeah.
So if you create a great support system, then being a single co-founder, you've got a support system around you that helps you continuously be resilient. The second is, in a journey of a startup, and I can be called out in saying this, but you're always fundraising somehow or the other. Now, fundraising doesn't mean you're always raising capital. You're always in the eyes of people who either want to invest in you, or you are looking at investment, or you are raising revenues, which inevitably means you are fundraise worthy. Whether your business needs capital or not, this is how I'm using the word fundraising in our definition. So if the startup has to talk to potential stakeholders, even if they are a bootstrap company and want to remain, which there are some brilliant examples of bootstrap companies out there, the amount of time that goes into talking to external stakeholders also takes away from your business.
Yeah.
Now the question is, if the business is being not taken care of, then does it even make sense doing the front facing job? And if the front facing job is not happening,
Yeah.
then I feel you're not doing justice to the product or brand you're building. So it all goes back to, if you're a single founder, build a team that is almost like founders. If you're a dual founding team, figure out how do you balance your strengths and weaknesses. If you're three or four founders, anything above that, in my observation, I've always, and I've also said this to some of our teams, you have to have trust in one of the founders to be able to make executive decisions. Because what is the beauty between a startup and a typical large scale organization is layers of decision making are always better in a startup, conventionally, right? I mean, I'm not just stereotyping, this is how it happens. Why does it happen? Because a startup has a leaner organization system, and the moment you are three founders or four founders and everyone has to be consulted, you're losing out to the speed of innovation or deployment of your solution, or a growth momentum. And if you do that, then, well, you're up for a rainy day ahead.
Right. What do you think about the White Hat Junior founder? Doing it all alone. How do you think he could have done that?
I think, there's certain people built special.
Yeah.
And then there's no other answer to that. There's some
Yeah.
great single founder journeys, right? And I
Yeah.
don't want to, I'm not taking away from single founders. I think there's a single founder journey, there's a speciality in how they do it.
I think they have a method to the madness. Like they have it. They have a structure to how they how they plan their journeys.
No, I think
They've all mapped out. I feel.
No, you're right. I think it's a great feeling and it's a relevant feeling. But the most important part is that they've obviously built a team that they can call as founders, right? This I can say with a lot of confidence, that any single founder out there, if you ask them the commonality between why they've been able to be a single founder, it is because they've built a team that they know that if they don't do that the single founder is doing, the team will do it. So sure, they from an optics standpoint, from a starting standpoint and remaining, they are the single founder. But are they truly a single founder in their mind? I doubt it. I highly doubt it. In order to start a journey alone, go through the hard phases of being a name that is being discussed on podcasts, that takes speciality.
Yeah.
So that I think there's certain things you learn, you can learn. There's certain things that you have to pretend you can do, and you have to continue doing it. And then there's certain things that only happen because of obsession. And I think that last bit, obsession, is a term you'll hear me saying a lot. Because if you aren't obsessed, if you aren't, fida about it, this journey is, it's an uphill.
Yeah.
And in order for the uphill to seem like a downhill run, it's the obsession of wanting to continuously wanting to go uphill. There's this, I'm just digressing. There's this, I can't remember the name of it, but there's this Greek mythology, I believe, where this man carrying a heavy, I think it's a rock. Every time uphill, every time he'd walk uphill, he'd reach there and he'd roll the rock down. He'd keep doing it because for him it wasn't staying at the peak that was fun; it was reaching the peak, and that is a founder.
Yeah.
You'll never, well, not never, but you'll mostly want the 0 to 1, 0 to 10 journey, irrespective of how large the multiple of your 1 or 10 is.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you rightly talk about three main challenges in the first 9 to 12 months before they come to the accelerator, which is one, what is their mindset in terms and the team that they're building. Second is the how in depth have they studied the problem and how attached they are to it. That's the second. And third is how deep are they going into the market and talking to their customers, interacting with them, seeing whether they can be their loyal followers, right?
So I just
Yeah.
want to clarify one thing there, right? I don't mean, I think this is just the first few. It could happen in 6 months, it could happen in 3, it could happen in 12.
Yeah, definitely.
This is the first avatar of a venture. It doesn't have to be before they get accelerated.
Definitely.
Yeah. So whether they go to an accelerator, go to a fund, doesn't matter. It just, this is the commonality between
Definitely.
this is the seed stage,
Yeah.
as we call it.
Yeah. Just to attach some numbers to it, right? You said go deep into a particular market and then identify your customers and then stick to them.
Yeah.
Just want to understand what kind of numbers would you want to potentially see? Have they want to get accelerated by a Huddle or any other kind of accelerator? What kind of numbers? Again, it would vary according to categories as well.
Yeah.
But just want to understand what kind of numbers or what kind of number of customers would you want to see? It can be, you can divide it into low frequency, high frequency kind of products, but just understanding basic numbers I would want to see.
Yeah, so it's a bit tricky for me to put numbers because in our journey so far, we've because we're speaking consumer, we've been part of ventures pre-product, and pre-product in many cases, pre-brand name.
But is that you're giving a lot of weightage to the founder there?
Always, you're always giving founder weightage. I mean, the founder is the spine of the business, and the team is the spine of the business. Multiple vertebras here and there. So when we joined Bold Care, which is a men's wellness, sexual wellness venture of ours, which is a team of 4 founders. When I still remember when Ishan and I were speaking to Rajat, he was discussing the idea with us of what he's going to do after he was leaving his job. We were so convinced that for us it was a joy to be able to say that, yeah, we're in, because we knew what value we'd want to add, what we could add, but more importantly, for us it was just our desire to want to work with this founder.
Yeah.
So we didn't join by any number. There was no number. In that case, Perfora, which is an oral care brand, they didn't have revenues. It was just 2 incredible founders, Tushar and Jatin, knowing that they want to disrupt the oral care industry. How do they want to cater to the user base that they've been amassing here since inception? And for us, we understood, okay, what's our value add? And obviously it was the founders' love for what they wanted to build, the methodical process in which they spoke about their product. And we have fortunately seen their brand name change multiple times before it actually got launched. So it wasn't numbers, it's always founder. Sure, because I know you had Bharat at Nirmalaya here, who's just an absolutely, I don't know how to describe him. He's a great friend. He's, he's, he loves what he does, he loves the process of how he's doing it. And he's probably one of the most agile founders I know. Agile because I've been able to see a business of his successfully fold within the business he built. He didn't have to raise capital for a while. He raised capital very strategically in his journey. And he has a long way to go. But when we joined him, I don't remember the numbers, he had traction. But to answer your question, now after saying it long, but in a shorter manner, let's take Nirmalaya's example. It wasn't how much he did, it was how he spoke about how he recognized his customers.
Yeah.
So let's, for conversation's sake, he had only sold to 100 customers. In his case, it was several more, but that's the scenario. He knew each customer set within those 100 customers. He knew who was not relevant and who he wanted to target and why there were pain points. So when a founder has enough input of what has worked and then a calculation of how far that can go versus what has not worked and reasons that it should, but it's a pain point, that is enough data for you to then look at it from your lens as, let's say, Huddle, and say, do I really know how to solve this? Because if you join a founder because you want to just piggyback on their success and you can't add to their early stage journey, I think it's going to be a bit of a challenging road for the founder. And I believe that in the early days, again, this is subject to everyone's opinion. You have to be able to add value as an investor.
Yeah.
You just have to, some way or the other. And I know 99.99% are. But I'm just saying for the 0.01% who just want to invest because it's an asset, which it is. But if you can add value to that asset, it'll go a long way for the founders and then you, of course.
No, it's very interesting. I never thought that pre-product a company could be funded without even founders having seasoned founders definitely can raise pre-product, can raise a lot of funding, but new founders, I think you give a lot of chance to new founders as well, pre-product as well. This is what I'm hearing from you.
Yeah.
So no, that's very interesting to even I think the ecosystem has evolved a lot that way in terms of early stage funding.
Yeah,
makes sense. I'm also curious to understand what have you noticed about these type of founders. You're talking about these founders very fondly, right? What is the difference between who are able to sustain their business versus because in this first 9 to 12 months when they come to you versus people who fold during this journey of understanding their customers, doing that market research, capturing their first few customers. And 90% of the businesses fail here, right? They talk about those 95%. I think 90% fail here. So what do you think, just 2-3 things that differentiate these founders from the regular founders who really fold in this period?
Yeah, I think the first element of success or failure in that journey is if you don't stay close to your customer, and this stands true for any part of your journey, but let's categorize it only for the early stage. If you don't build your productization, your distribution, your communication based on your customers that are loyal to you, you're bound to fail. Because there is no reason of building more products, doing unique distribution, and speaking a different language if those who are already loyalists of yours do not recognize you. Because the market to sell in the early days or even the later stages is always going to be large. If you're selling, in now what is the most populated country in the world, you're going to have an audience, right? So you have to understand that customer is key and you have to stay close to your customer. The other point is linked to the first, which is sometimes founders get driven by FOMO of what their competitors are doing.
Yeah.
And if they are doing that, I was talking about Bold Care. I think Bold Care is doing a great job and did a phenomenal job, even in the earliest of their days, to stay true to their go-to market, their productization. And they just said, we don't need to have multiple avenues to sell to multiple customers. We just because our competitors are doing it. And they've got a large share of competitors. Today, fortunately, they're doing the competitors are doing a great job, which is a boost to the market. And Boldcare is doing a great job because they stuck true to their customers. So don't just divide your products or your strategy based on FOMO or based on curiosity that मेरा competitor करना है तो मेरे को करना है. And the last bit is, I think being able to acknowledge what you're not good at in the early days and mending it by getting the right kind of advisors, mentors, getting the right kind of infrastructure built out around you. So if you've got investors, don't just go to your investors for everything. I think the best founders are the ones that know that I'm doing this well. I have a sounding board to keep checking me,
Yeah.
but I don't need someone to change what's going well. But I don't think a certain avenue, for conversation's sake, exports are critical to my business, but I don't have any understanding of how to build an export arm, how to build a team. Can I just figure that out as a roadmap for the next 3 months? Because it will add a delta to my margins by X percentage. If that's a goal, find advisors for that. So know what you need beforehand and build an advisory for it. Know what you're good at and have a sounding board to keep cross-examining it, so that in the circumstance you hit a plateau, they are there to recognize it and not constantly give you, course correction when it's not needed.
Just wanted to understand one more perspective, right? Do you see Jugadu founders as well, like as a fourth kind of a layer to it? And I have a good question on that as well, but just
Yeah.
wanted to understand here also. Like, do you look at Jugadu founders? Yaar, nahi, ye to kar lega. Like he has a way towards the market. Like he would penetrate the market anyway. I've seen those founders, and I'm fond of them, right? My co-founder is again that kind of a person. But he's not like we starting as a co-founder, we didn't understand कि यार ये GTM क्या होने वाला है, इसका PMF कैसे achieve करेंगे. But we were just into the market figuring out things, और वो जुगाड़ से हो गया, right? Do you look at that as well?
So before I answer that, what's your definition of जुगाड़? Because लोगों के तो एक दो meanings तो है यहाँ पे.
हाँ. My जुगाड़ is related to a growth hack, and I think that's जुगाड़.
I think you hit the nail on the head with that example, right? I categorize that as obsession.
Yeah, exactly. That's obsession.
So, so to answer your question, 100%.
Yeah.
It's a given. You've got to. So people use the word hustle, or I personally don't like the word hustle because it almost feels like you'll do it at the cost of anything. I like the word jugaad. I love the word obsession. I think वो तो करना पड़ेगा यार. You've got to if you don't let people realize how much you love what you're doing or love the reason why you're doing it, they won't, that passion won't share. So this is a great example. We have to face that and feel that from our founders, right? The conviction. Sometimes conviction is a large part of why their founder love or their brand love that they have. I notice. Okay, so I think another point that I'll add to this, I really like, and I've observed some great founders being very, very well aware of how their competitors are doing, and those that have the ability to appreciate what their competitors are doing.
Yeah.
I've noticed this, and I think that because what that's made me realize is when you can appreciate what your competitor is doing, you have more chances of learning from them. And if you look at some great founders, they will always appreciate the market, the leaders, the new incumbents, because they are observing what is working in their favor. How can I adopt?
No, that's very interesting to know. I also want to touch upon so these founders are dynamic, they're optimistic, they're mostly crazy, right? But as an early stage VC, when you're working with these young freshly minted entrepreneurs, How do you see these differences in personality, their attitude, the approach, between the VC and the entrepreneur play out? And what are some of these benefits or say the challenges of this dynamic that you see between the venture capitalist and the entrepreneur?
Yeah, so I'll start that with a example that immediately comes. So it's happened a lot of times. I won't name the founders, but where they mention, मैं आपसे कैसे बात करूं अभी दोस्त की तरह या इन्वेस्टर तो मैं दोस्त से बात कर रहा हूँ इन्वेस्टर से बात कर रहा हूँ so they're always questioning, right? Who are you right now to me? Are you a friend? Are you an investor? Are you an advisor? Are you that person who will evaluate us for future or has been a part of our pre-seed? What I have noticed is that in the early stages, when a founder is unfunded and you're a part of their journey, you're tracking them, you're working with them in a hands-on manner, versus when they get capital, they sometimes, mostly, I mean, I'm going to put the majority scenario, they realize that they have to suddenly be a little different because now capital's come into the business and I have to change my I wouldn't say persona, but perception of how I run this business. I think that's correct in many ways, and we can get to what works. But what's incorrect about it is that it sometimes adds the seriousness in the job that takes away the fun from it.
Yeah.
Because when you're getting, and let's talk about first-time founders, right? That have got capital suddenly. It's a big task to get capital, but it's a bigger task to maintain it, to honor it, to do a good job with it. It's your duty to create shareholder wealth then. But in the process, we forget that something was working in order for you to have attracted that capital. कोई ऐसे नहीं डालता पैसे. They're not philanthropists, right? So if you remove the seriousness that the capital brings, while being able to respect it, a funded founder can still think in their unfunded manner that got them the funding. I sometimes see founders not being able to do that. And I think that's also a reason why that failure happens. They somehow course correct and let go of what has worked for them. Many a times, what works for unfunded founders versus is the fact that they're talking to everyone. So that means they're that the upset and that obsession of saying I'll do everything. They're not. Time management is important. Being able to say no is very important. But let's try everything. Let's figure it out. Sometimes when you get funded, that responsibility or that burden comes, right? You're thinking runway. I think the issue with thinking runway also is that you get hung up on the fact that the clock is ticking, which I'm not. Runway is very important, but build your business in a manner where you don't have to think of only your runway. You're thinking about business growth, and business growth gives you the luxury to have your time to do things like you were doing in the past. I think that's the key area. I really won't go anywhere else. The good thing about how a founder changes when they get capital and the VC or a founder relationship is the great founders, they start questioning you, about your thesis in the industry. And I love that. I'm not going to name the founders, but I really like when they start questioning, like, how are you looking at our journey? Okay, chalo, we've reached a 50 lakh a month run rate and net, and we're at a crore a month, whatever that number is. Our product SKU is, these four. He's giving you examples. What do you think we need to do? I like that. That questioning. See, and they're not doing it only for advice. They're also trying to evaluate the, what can I attract? What support can I attract? How relevant will you be in my follow-ons if you've got the capital? So I really like founders that question and make VCs, quote unquote, sweat a little bit. Okay, oh damn, they're questioning me as much. Those are great founders.
No, because they're serious about the business, right? It's their business. Even though you have raised out capital, still you own 95% of the business maybe at that time.
That doesn't. I
Yeah.
don't think it's about
Yeah.
equity,
Yeah.
ownership. I mean, that's very important. We should certainly talk about being able to control dilution and all. But I see this a lot, and I've got a lot of, I've got some I've got different opinions from different people on this, but I feel the startup industry, the startups, the investors have been put on a pedestal, slightly higher pedestal than the startups. Whereas the startup industry wouldn't be there if it wasn't for startups. Simple. Most simple thing to say. So why I truly believe that the shift has to be ulta. I keep telling a lot of my friends in the industry that investor pitching honi chahiye, startup pitching nahi honi chahiye. And they always say, "Kya hai? Why making that job so difficult?" And I say because there's such quality of startups, and if you again it goes back to what I was saying earlier. If you end up investing in something where you cannot add that value, then you're going to hurt both sides, your shareholders as well as the founder. So hopefully you will inspire people to do investor pitching where we can make founders know why us. I'm not saying it should only be that.
But does that kind of sessions happen? Like where maybe
I don't know. I don't think it does. But
Yeah.
what I'm trying to get to is, in this example, I don't know if it ends up happening or it happens, is that it's a level playing field. You're both
Yeah.
lucky to be a part of the same journey. The startup is the reason you're part of it. The founder is the reason you're a part of it. So if it's 100%, the weightage is always has to be more for the founders.
No, amazing. Uh, uh, let's shift gears, and let's talk a bit about product. Come out of founder mindset.
Yeah.
Let's talk a bit about product. Go a little more hands-on, right? I want to understand your take on the balance between new product innovations versus product optimization during this journey of building early, right? How do these two approaches differ, and what role does optimization play specifically in these early stages of building a business?
So I think in the early stages, once you know your champion product, you first have to break down and figure out the serviceable audience for it. And how do you do that? You first ideally need to figure out your cost of acquisition, your average order values, an average repeat ratio, and how can you, if you look at these three formulas together, sustainably, how fast and what percentage can you grow and how fast can you grow, and what is that serviceable audience if you have to do that. First, figure that out. If your answer is that from quantum, I'm making $10 today, I can make only $100 from here at the same ratio, then when you're 70% in, and this is personal opinions and observations that I worked, you need to start figuring out how can you now go into different distribution avenues, that are sustainable. Again, how can you go into different models that create more repeat usage? So before you figure out productization, so product development, I always try and urge all of us and our founders to figure out the formula and the serviceable audience to replicate what you're doing at a larger scale by doing the whole calculation on CAC versus AOV versus retention and LTV, your lifetime value that you can generate from that consumer. Then figure out your ability to now say, okay, which distribution channels have I not touched? And if you haven't touched certain distribution channels, test them out. Because you don't want to try and create more products till you don't know almost all the distribution channels. Because you never know which new product will be better suited for a new distribution channel. And you don't want to test out both distribution and new products at the same time. That's too many tasks at one hand. Which gets me to the fact that once you've tested out new distribution and you feel you've got a hang of it, sometimes it's worth doing product-based and analysis. And there's a large part when you're doing new distribution, you have to go into realizing your data at hand. So your data will always tell you where your core customers are. And I always suggest our founders to do offline distribution only based on their captive audience data. So if your captive audience, for conversation's sake, is giving you $30 out of the $100 you're making, or 30 rupees out of the 100 rupees you're making, then only, and for conversation's sake, that is in Gurgaon, and within Gurgaon, it's the pocket of phase 1 and phase 2 of Gurgaon. Then only go to the modern bazaar over there, go to the general trade stores over there, create your quick commerce performance marketing strategies over there, and test those out, and then realize how expensive are these, because that will also help you in figuring out why should you raise more capital, can you afford working capital for it. Then we come into product development.
Yeah.
So product development, and how do you do product development, is a lot of customer research. Again, many ways of doing it, right? What are your leaders doing? You go ahead and do it, but that's not always going to be true to what your customer wants, right? And I think when I look at journeys in, we were talking about what the team at Perfora has been doing. When I've seen what's worked so brilliantly, I think everyone in my family is a huge Perfora consumer. The reason we're so hooked and we have that brand love to what they're doing is because somehow or the other they always knew what we wanted. And let's take that example of how they went from a water flosser that was a larger size to a handheld transport one. Maybe in their research they realized their audience are avid travelers that want to carry their water flossers. They came out with, in the summer, which we just actually again I got, which was the mango based mango themed toothbrush. And the gamification of it, right? So contextual at all times. Maybe they realize that their audience is loving different
Yeah.
colors. If I go completely away into even realizing what Bharat and Nirmalya was doing, why did he go from into Havan cups? Why has he gone into fragrances? It's being close to your consumers want, and then when you know what your consumer wants, you already know how to distribute it because of what we were discussing. So product development is always customer oriented, and then if you really want to try and be innovative, and you feel you can go into different horizontals of your business, uh, there's no harm in putting in some capital in innovation of new categories, as long as you know where you can tap out, and it's not a loss to you, right? So if I take an example of another investment of ours, which is Blue Tokai Coffee. In Blue Tokai, been known for their cafes for multiple years, created some phenomenal brand love and brand trust across India, but went into cans, cold brew cans. Now, while I'm a consumer and a shareholder in Blue Tokai, I also love what Sleepy Owl does. I absolutely love what Rage Coffee does, what Bharat's doing over there, but they still went out to build into a similar category because they realized that their core consumers want that product, but it was still an innovation in their core theme.
Yeah.
So the the core of knowing your innovation also is that what is the ceiling you're going to put in the circumstance it fails. Because if it fails, can you fail fast? If you fail fast, then the cost of failure is almost nothing. Because if you fail early and you fail fast in your productization journey and innovation journey, you're more likely to not make that mistake in the future.
Yeah.
And the scale only gets larger as you succeed. So fail quickly, innovate quickly, and recognize why you failed, because that data will help you re-innovate in the future again.
No, makes a lot of sense. But just to attach some kind of numbers to it and make it more
Sure.
easier for our
Yeah.
audience to encapsulate this. Say again, the brand is accelerated. Now they have a few products in their hood, right? They have 3 or 4 products in their hood. None of them are working, say, right? Or maybe one of them is working. Now, how do they look at their product launch journeys in the next, say, 1 year? Do they capitalize on the existing product, add more fuel to it, or do they keep adding new products every 3 months, every 4 months? How does that really work? How does the process really work? How does the founder think about adding new products to the portfolio or because each of these decisions would take capital. If you want to scale up your existing products, the marketing cost, the CAC would go up. You have to put in working capital. If you're wanting to invest in new products, the time that you will go in the market research side of things, then launching the product in the market, figuring out the GTM for that will take time. So how do you take that decision on constantly launching products versus optimizing on your existing products? How does that decision go?
So I think firstly, founders should always be knowing what they should always be innovation in the back end. Constantly. You cannot stop innovating. So you need to know what you might come out with, because in the consumer world, there's competition is very high. You have to keep your customers engaged. Whether you come out with a product or not, you could be a Red Bull that just has one champion product and stays true, or Yakult as an example, right? And again, let's go back to the coffee space, right? Let's see what we were talking about. I mentioned Rage Coffee. He's challenged Nescafe. He's challenging, now into cans, right? Different variants. I think if none of if out of 4 products, one of them is working, recognize why 3 aren't working early and get it out of the way. Now, I can't put a number to any founder's journey into saying that if your 3 aren't working for X, if your 3 X rupees, if your 3 aren't working and your CAC is going exorbitantly, that is creating unsustainability in your business, before it even reaches there, you need to close it. So that means you need to you always need to test out your products in core markets where your first champion product is working. Because if your loyalist audience is not going to pick up your second product, then as a founder, you already have a new task at hand, which is find another loyal consumer. And if you cannot afford that based on the capital you have, be it your cash flows or the funding you've got, if you cannot afford a new CAC, don't do it. And then comes the question, a scenario that if they don't afford it, what are they really doing? They're just trying to tap out their entire audience. They're just trying to build an absolute monopoly in their product range. Boat, as an example, a great consumer journey, a phenomenal consumer journey, in fact, that just went after their audience and then built multiple products and now are innovating over and over again.
Yeah.
So I think what we have to bear in mind as founders, in the consumer world, is it's okay if your productization is not happening. It's no one's going to call you out. And sometimes, especially in a world like this, consumer brands need to always be priced at the revenue, the net revenue that they're making. It's not a GMV business. So it's okay if your business has a repeat ratio with a sustainable slow growth rather than an unpredictable rapid up and down. Where many times we get stuck in this that मेरे को तो ऐसे ही build करना है. It's okay. This slowly is fine. There will come ups and downs in this. The
Right.
consumer as an industry in the whole, the beauty of it is consumer spend is increasing. Social media has played a large part in different kinds of consumption, different opinions being built, and we're becoming a richer country. Therefore, there's more consumer scope. You're never going to lose if you just stay true to your economics, true to your consumers' need, and not greedy for exorbitant and unjustifiable growth.
Right. But just to again understand, a nuance here, right? Where and we'll talk a lot more about this on the data and measurement side of things. But just to understand, how will you today make sure when to kill a product, right? Because say is it you have say if you're building the coffee in the coffee space, right? And you're selling these coffees on your website. Today you have to see the repeat rates for them. Maybe you acquire the customer say at 100% 100% CAC, but then you look at that particular customer's repeat rate. Does that how you take a decision on whether to kill a product or not? Is that customer coming in? So say there are 100 customers, 40 customers come back, and you understand that this product is working.
Yeah.
Right? And then in the next 3 months, and if it doesn't work, you kill that product. Is that how you take a decision, or is there more nuances to it?
No, I think that's one of the fundamentally most important nuance to it. That okay, let's look at it exactly what you said, right? First and foremost, if your product has a repeat ratio, let's say about 30%,
Yeah.
you're doing a good job. 35%, you're doing a good job. Your repeat ratio is there. Can it increase? Of course. You know, um, if you're a, I can't remember the company's name, like a Bombay Shaving, right? Company, great name. Obviously, I'm not a consumer of it because of my beard, but huge company, incredible branding, challenged and very difficult business. Their repeat ratio must be off the charts. It would be incredible because they created that product that needs constant consumption. Have they been able to innovate in it? Yeah, the blades, the different kinds of shaving creams, the kind of brushes they have, all of it is innovation. Sure, it can be that they're just learning from legacy players, but that's okay. Now, have they killed products? Maybe. I don't know. And probably you don't know. So, how do they kill them, right? If the repeat ratio did not meet the champion product's repeat ratio,
Yeah.
that's your answer.
That's the answer. Yeah.
Because, sorry, that means if your champion product typically gives you the best ROI and your champion products, if you're not getting that or you're not reaching a mark of sustainability over there, and 3 months, 3 months can be 6 months, can be 9 months. It's subjective to the company's cash flows. Let's first establish that every startup is different. The difference between my glass and your glass right now is mine has more runway because of the water it has, and yours is empty. So your innovation ratio is very less. Mine is so much, and when I top it up, it's a little more.
Yeah.
Therefore, innovation is subject to your affordability of it, and that creates a risk profile of how long can you innovate. Sure, if you can innovate and experiment and wait it out, better. But if you realize that your product is seasonal, then that is quite easy to understand. So if you realize that okay, यार लोग तो मास्क बहुत खरीद रहे थे. I mean, it's not the best thing to say. People should still be wearing a mask today, but मास्क तब बहुत खरीदे, मैंने मास्क शुरू कर दिया. But now masks are my core product, but मैं कुछ और बेचता था. That's not right, because that's not core to your business. Or I again don't want to name people here, but people that went straight into gummies as a business.
Yeah.
Saying that I just have to do it because everyone's doing it. It's very hard what Divij at Power Gummies has built. Building a great brand. It's taken a while to even build gummies as a segment for him. But he's building a brand that's synonymous with it. And that doesn't mean just because he's been able to do it and there are other players out there that we can name, that doesn't mean everyone should get in. So FOMO drives typically a lot of innovation. So we'll be very mindful when you're doing innovation. Why are you doing it?
Yeah. No, these are great, and these are interesting insights on one, how to kill a product. Second is even create a new category, as you said, power gummies as well. Great. But let's consider this, right? Let's consider this. Say the product is now stable, as we have understood, and now this entrepreneur has come to Huddle to taste some early success. One of the important consideration for any consumer brand is a solid GTM strategy. Talk to us about what is a GTM strategy for a consumer brand, and what is it dependent upon, and how can a GTM strategy say differ across different kind of categories?
So, I mean, firstly, if the venture has been at the stage that we have mentioned, we'd hope Huddle has already been a part of their journey.
Yeah.
Okay, so we want to come in early. We want to be a part of everything that we've discussed. But let's talk about some funds that I absolutely admire. Let's say Fireside or a DSG or out there. Those that are backing some brands that I'm pretty sure you and I are consumers of. So growth funds. Once you've built all of this, you've got your product market fit. Frankly, your GTM is also in place by this stage. Now comes the journey of figuring out that now if I have to go from, so let's say a company at this stage is doing 1 crore a month. They're at 12 crore ARR. Anything from their 1 to 5 crore journey or a 5 to 10 crore journey, frankly, you're starting now to talk to a newer audience set, be it because of scale, be it because you need to increase your retention rates even more, which means you somehow have to make a different purchase pattern for your consumer. That means you need them to consume maybe not 28 days in, but 14 days in. Or you're going to a wider audience. That means somehow or the other, your competition also has completely changed. When you reach that stage, you're starting to typically challenge the legacy brands. And when you're doing that, what stands out for you? I'm only going to segment it to one thing in my biggest observation. What makes you stand out in your go to market after you've done everything we've discussed is your ability to be strong at content. If your content is consistent, if your content is reaching your prospective consumer through any medium, could be a newsletter, it could be Instagram, it could be brand partnerships with other brands that you can piggyback off, that are not competitive to you but complementary to you, and let's go into some examples in a moment there. You are going to win the race of getting from that 1 to 5 crores, because content ensures brand awareness, then brand recall, brand curiosity, tasting the brand, or understanding what that brand is, and then brand love. These 5 things will only happen because there's a reason why we're all, and I'm going to segment you also into all hooked to social media. It's the content play, right?
Yeah.
If your content is king, you will keep coming back. I've seen the best brands do it. If you look at how legacy brands are now talking, their content is quirky. It hasn't been quirky since back in the day, but now it's speaking more to the audience. But it's been consistent. If you look at a Vim ad, or if you look at a Ujala ad, they're always the same narrative. That means it's worked. If you look at Zomato's incredible advertising, or what Muscle Blaze is doing these days on billboards, it's engaging. You might not need the protein, you might not want it, but you know it. Then tomorrow someone talks about, you hit the gym, you say, oh, protein chahiye, or you're not being able to hit your protein demands, you say, I remember that. You might not know what the product is, but that name will stick with you. So I think that's the biggest journey, content.
No, amazing. I think on the definitely a consumer brand has to definitely crack the content side of things. But again, there are a lot more. There are a lot of channels to communicate to your audience. There's email, then there is Instagram, then there's a lot more social media channels. On your website also you can communicate, right? So there has to be a method to which that there is a loop that you can create where the customer goes A, then B, then C, and then come backs again and purchases, right? So is there a strategy that you look at from a consumer brand's perspective? Because even today the content is again getting saturated, and with chat gpt's advent you can again create those kind of content, like they keep churning content also at any point in time, and the volume of content can also increase. So just want to understand how would you now differentiate between different kinds of brands, uh, and it's hard for the consumer as well. So I follow, say, the Whole Truth, and they churn out like great content on email, right? Where
Yeah.
they break down the truth for they will break down the truth for, say, bread one day, and then sugar the next day. Sugar though we already know, but say bread, right? That's great content. But does that hook me to buy the product? Not not at this point. Maybe then I'll go to their Instagram, understand a few more things, and then maybe I'll go to their website and buy. What do you think could be a unique GTM strategies for new consumer brands?
I think you actually, the questions in your answer, right? It's about creating multiple. I truly believe it's about creating multiple touch points to begin with, and then it's about being omnipresent on these channels. Let's only segment it to online, and then I'll tell you why I say this. Because if you're doing chatbots on your website, if you're doing chatbots on, you're using WhatsApp as a medium, you're using the alternatives of TikTok and your Instagrams and Facebooks, every channel has a different viewer class, or a customer segment. and you don't know who's going to bite your content as in one in three forms. The best is they are your consumer. The second best is they're a, as we used to call it when I worked at Star Sports, they're the flirts in the industry. That means they're flirting with the idea, so they will test it out. That means if they test it out, if your product is solid, they will come back to you. And the third is they're just a potential advocate of your product. There are a lot of people who advocate products because the content's so great वो forward कर देंगे. I think you gave a great example of Whole Truth. I love the content. I absolutely love the content. I have friends who've shared content of theirs with me. I'm a big Whole Truth consumer, especially of their peanut butter bar. But I don't know if my friends who've shared it with me are. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. But they were advocates of it.
Yeah.
So these three things lead. So you have to have multiple touch points. I think in addition to content, if you can make the person test your product. I think it was Wingreens is a great example.
Yeah.
G-
Offline testing. Yeah.
offline testing. Now, sure, that comes at a cost, but we're talking about a stage where you've already created a great online presence, and your data is now suggesting that you and I have to take our business to that phase one market ka modern trade. We'll do a testing there. While Wingreens is a great example of an Indian business, again, I've been my fridge is stocked with their dips, and have I know a lot of friends who have had it, and they'll keep liking the product because the product is good. But it didn't happen because of content for me. It happened because of that offline touch point. Now, a good example can be also derived from this brand called Innocent. Innocent is a brand based out of the UK that got, I believe, acquired by Coca-Cola back in the day. And a very interesting concept these friends had started. And what is Innocent? Innocent is just a brand that was giving cold pressed juices, and now they went into any raw product. So it could be fruits in a jar, it could be soup that's made with high quality spinach and so on and so forth. But when they started their first product, it was cold pressed juices, and they were in a music festival where they had two dustbins, and they said if you like it, if you pay for it, put it in this dustbin, call it the red dustbin. If you don't like it, put it in the yellow dustbin. By the end of it, they saw the dustbin. They had everyone try the product that even didn't like it or liked it. That means they figured out who doesn't like it in terms of quantity, maybe data as well of observation, because you already know the audience in the music festival, you've done your segmentation.
Yeah.
And they realized that, this basket shows more people want to buy our product, and they launched. So multiple touch points.
Oh, that's that's a great strategy to test offline events again.
Yeah.
Great strategy. It's a different kind of a approach to the market. Great. Let's shift gears and talk a bit about branding as well. Right. There's a debate that you don't have a brand if you don't have good sales numbers to start with. Right. What is your view on that thought? And do you what is your thought on about your brand, building your brand early, when you're building your company, so to say, in terms of design, communication, packaging, and the overall experience, so to say?
So I mean, I'm in a similar thought process like you. I don't think you have a brand if your numbers aren't strong.
Yeah.
What are strong numbers? Strong numbers are good, repeatable numbers. You're not a brand. You are a brand, but you're not a great brand or a good brand. What is a brand? A brand is a product that has strong affiliation. That's
Yeah.
my definition of it. If your product is affiliated a lot, you are the brand for that consumer. And numbers and repeatability needs to show that. Not, in my eyes, not unique users, but core users. How important is it to build your brand ethos, your language, your tonality? Incredibly important.
Yeah.
It's incredibly important. It's like it's like wearing your jersey before playing for a match. It's like telling a you know telling a team to go out and wear any jersey but play football.
Right.
Who do they represent? if you wear your jersey continuously, you've created that your resonance. That if it's red, I just thought of Coca-Cola. You know, if it's a Christmas ad in the UK, I'm thinking of Coca-Cola as well. So that is very important. Now, can a brand language change? Can a brand positioning change? Yes, it can. But how do you realize it needs to change? Probably is after you've tapped out into the market that is not resonating with you anymore. And that again, comes into the journey where, let's take Wellverse as an example. It was a company called KetoFi. It was just it was focusing on the keto diet, catering towards diabetics and people who wanted food for the keto diet per se. And they realized, okay, we're catering to diabetics, now we can cater to those with cholesterol issues, PCOD, etc. Whatever the problem statement would be. Then they realized we can't just be called KetoFi. Why can't we rebrand ourselves into Wellversed? What was important about this is that trust first came by making your KetoFi customers know we are Wellversed. Then going out to the larger audience. It wasn't, hey, we are Wellversed, and guess what? KetoFi people, we've also rebranded. First, you have to inform and make your people who are with you know that we're graduating. It's a great way of also being incredibly close to your consumer by getting them involved in your journey. Like the way Lay's does it. Lay's got their consumers multiple times across the world choose the flavor. I mean, you look at the freedom you're giving they probably know what they're going to do to a large extent. They just need to verify it. Now, that's not a branding example. It's just a way of saying that if there's no reason of doing it unless your consumer makes you realize you need to do it.
Yeah. No, makes sense. But just to attach again some numbers to it,
Sure.
what kind of spend distribution, a brand versus an acquisition would you want to see, or have you observed in successful brands in early stages? Say they're doing 10, 15, 20 lakhs kind of a revenue on a monthly basis, right, which is a 2-3 crore kind of an ARR. What kind of a spend distribution would you ideally see a brand spending on brand versus acquisition?
Okay, so I think when we're speaking of brand, I'll just break down the definition of how at least I define it.
Okay.
I'm not talking about branding as marketing.
Okay.
I was referring to branding as just first creating your brand ethos, your brand building, exercise your narrative, your content. Acquisition, by the end of it, marketing has to lead to acquisition.
Definitely.
So, if 30% of your 30 to 35% of your costs will go into acquisition. Your funding, you raise funding, at least 30 to 35%, if not more, will go. In the early stages, you're typically raising to hire a team, and 40 to 50% of that can go up to 60% at least goes into hiring. You miscellaneous take 10% for conversation's sake, or contingency buffer capital. Marketing and sales becomes typically the rest.
Yeah, makes sense. But what is your take on, say, some brands playing in a very different way where, say, they come out on every month, at the end of the month, they would come out with a very big discount, to to maybe get their stock out, or most importantly, meet sales numbers as well. What do you think of that? Do you think customers really understand that game, and then they kind of wait for the month end and then start buying that product? What do you think? What do you think about that?
No, I actually don't have the answer to whether customers are doing that.
Yeah,
Have I done that? Yes.
I've done that as well.
Yeah, exactly. So I think then the answer is yes for at least 2 out of 2 people.
Yeah.
I don't know. Whoever watches this, that'll be a good question to ask for data for anyone. Do they really wait? It's very easy to see when a startup's doing discounting just to get rid of stock. If they're getting rid of stock because they need to, and they're like, yeah, iske baad we're not going to come out with it, chalo. Get that out of the way. But if they're doing it continuously and there's a pattern, that pattern can be caught.
Yeah.
Then as an investor and a stakeholder in that company, or an incoming investor, you understand that this is inflating their numbers.
Yeah.
Then there's then there's either an issue into saying that your pricing strategy is wrong. So one way of looking at this thing is, okay, if, 2 out of 2 people are buying your product at a discounted rate, that means they still like your product. Let's figure out your pricing can be adjusted. Now, how will your pricing get adjusted? You figure out your operations and your cost of your cogs and everything in the back end, right? Or you decode and say, no, these 2 out of 2 people have never come back before. They're unique, and every time a discount happens, they're unique people. That means you're catering to the flirts. That means your product need is not there. So see, you have to understand everything. By the end of it, the center of gravity is loyalty and retention.
Yeah.
Or repeatability. Let's call it. The center of gravity is repeat ratio.
No, makes sense. Makes sense. Also, a big part uh, of branding and marketing is obviously the customer experience, right? Uh, what should brand prioritize? Between say acquisition and customer experience in again early stages. Again, let's take the example of the 10-20 lakh kind of a revenue on a monthly basis. And how do we track experience to understand if we can scale to the next phase? Because if you set the experience, uh, we also need to understand how do we really move forward to the next phase. Is it NPS scores that you really track? How do we track experience?
So yeah, I think we break down experience into saying that CRM, right? Like
Yeah.
what's the management when someone posts a complaint? What's the time to resolve it? What's the time to respond to begin with? Then when we look at experience and packaging, when they get the product, what's that experience? What is the experience indicating? Is it an experience that nudges them to come back to the website? Is it an experience that makes them want to post? Are they coming back? If it's the former, that says, okay, scan this code, your next purchase will have a 15% discount if you do it in 28 days, and we're only going to, we'll only give it to you. Or buy this code and refer to someone. Are they doing these things? These are all call to actions. So customer experience actually, the way I look at it is what you're trying to trigger, is it actually happening? So if you're saying, thank you for buying your Perfora toothbrush, here's a code for one person of your choice. Has that code been availed by 100 people that got the code? That showcases your experience with your customer and your engagement with your customer, because engagement leads to experience, or vice versa actually. The second scenario could be when someone's complaining. What are they continuously complaining about? Because NPS is linked to that, right? And then rectify it. So be very true to your complaints. I think you have to have a team member in customer experience.
Yeah.
Whether they're doing 2 jobs within the organization in that journey of 15 lakhs a month or 20 lakhs a month, after a while, when you've got 30% of your audience repeat, you have to have a team dedicated to customer experience, because customer experience leads to, again, repeatability, loyalty, good association. You can do a lot more iterations. So for instance, when we've got a venture that we've, again, I'm a consumer of, although it's not targeted to me. It's a company called Gladful. They
Gladful.
create breakfast oriented chillas, dosas. They create protein bites for kids and parents. When they reiterated their products, have grown, when they're an early stage venture that's growing, they only went to their core customers who were responding to them to say, okay, try out our next product. They did very calculated testing. Now that customer experience also must have created loyalty in the process, right? You were first to test out the product. uh, there's there is a there's an association that gets created with you and that brand that's favoring you in a way. You could be a mix of 1,000 or 100,000 other people, but that goes a long way. I think, lastly, on customer experience, there are there are case studies that we shouldn't name, to say that if you're not catering to customer experience, that your your journey from a brand to a product is faster. So so why are you building a consumer brand if you don't have customer experience?
No, that's actually right. I think so. I remember the couple of founders, well-renowned founders, talking about customer experience and saying that we sit with our customer experience teams really because that gives us a lot of insight into the market. What products to launch actually?
Yeah.
That really comes out of the customer success teams. So customer success teams is one of the integral parts, I think, for any consumer.
I'll
brand.
also add that when a team member, let's say when you're a lean team and you find a team member leaving, I would go to the extent, I've done this, to ask them, what would you change in this organization of ours? Go that far. It's okay, yaar. 2-3 गालियाँ दे देंगे आपको. They'll tell you things you don't want to hear, and you can't have an ego. Because okay, let me say that in the founder mindset bit. If you enter this industry with an ego, you're gone.
Yeah.
If you create an ego, you're gone. There's no room for ego.
Yeah.
You're here, you'll be humbled so many times in your journey. So I just want to mention that, I think it's very important because there are other cases where people don't believe in that philosophy. Each to their own, not mine. But coming to the fact, learn from your team also that kya badloge yahan pe. It's so important because if you have that founder mindset created around your team, always hear from your team also. A lot of innovation comes in, and I'll give you a really good example. At least for me, it's a great example. At Huddle alone, the way we have evolved as an organization, as an early stage enabler, as an accelerator and a fund, a lot of innovation we've done internally was built not by Ishan and me. And would Ishan and me have been able to think through that innovation by ourselves? No way. It was the team that we're very fortunate to have, the kind of founder mindset they've got, who kept challenging, ye kyun ho raha hai, aise kyun ho raha hai, have those sessions and unlearn in those sessions. They go a very long way. And typically, if I have to put a time period to it, do it at least every 45 to 60 days.
Yeah.
Whether you implement, you'll never implement everything, but at least 45 days, do those sessions.
Every 45, 60 days, give the driver's seat to the people in your team.
No, they should always be on the driver's seat. Everyone should be.
Yeah, no, or from the questions.
I think have a brainstorming
Yeah.
session to say, okay, what's going wrong? What's going right? How do we change? What should we add? Then you figure out relevance.
Yeah.
Every organization can do that.
Oh, makes sense. Makes sense. With this conversation, I remember I was watching this podcast, Shantanu's. Right? He talked about ego, right? When he came into the market, wanted to build Bombay Shaving Company, right? He talked about ego, right? He said, I'll get into this market. Everybody will buy my razor, and I'm building the greatest razor that I can, in at least in India, right? And that fell flat. So you have to be really humble, I think.
Yeah.
Understand your customers and then build out for the audience.
Yeah.
Right. So I want to move on from marketing and talk a bit about distribution as well. It's a fairly standard practice now that you would see to test out your products online because it's a fairly cheap way of testing products, and maybe then go offline and get some. Once you've got the validation online, you go tap into the offline channels and target a bigger TAM. However, do you think that's the right way for to blindly think about distribution when you're launching a brand? Like, do you think that's valid?
Yeah, in the early days, there are 2 routes you can go. 3 routes, but let's just say you're only choosing the online route to begin with. Also, this answer is very subjective to the segment you're in.
Yeah, definitely.
So, if you take the segment of Alcobev, you can't do it online.
Yeah.
So we're only talking about offline. We'll get into that scenario, and I'll give an example of a brand of ours that does a job purely offline because what else? Their routes right now, barring some states in the country, are very limited to online. When you look at online strategies, you have to first figure that what's your reason to. First, are you launching to create uptake and see does your product have uptake, or are you trying to just capture data? And if your first thought is no, I just want to create product uptake, figure out on my accord of saying, okay, it's okay, I don't know who the customer is, then you go very marketplace heavy. You go very marketplace heavy because you price yourself as the pricing that's relevant, but you're also tasked into saying, okay, I'm a nutraceutical brand. There's so many nutraceutical competitors out there. मेरा चल रहा है. And ठीक है, Amazon पे चल रहा है, Flipkart पे चल रहा है. You will understand segmentation over there, geographies you know, and you're limited to certain data. The other way of doing it is, no, I want to go or my captive audience heavy. So I'll build for my website. My margins will come from there. My data will be key to me. It'll be proprietary to me. That's typically a harder route. However, suggest it's better to have your captive even in the early days. It's not typically the most used method. I've typically seen 30-70, where 30 is captive, 70 is marketplace. I'd rather it be 60-40 in favor in the early days to captive audience.
Yeah.
Now, the reason I say that is because your ability to go offline is very data-led.
Yeah.
There are many ways of going offline. Then, I think even before we go to the offline world, if your product has ability to do exports, I always try and guide teams that build your export channels, because that creates a very different volume of demand. It creates newer ancillary avenues for revenue. It's not ancillary; it's just newer margin profile that gets created for you, and it has a repeat ratio that can return capital that you can then utilize for innovation or new productization or marketing for that matter. And then if you go heavy into offline, don't just go out into everywhere. Like we've been talking about the scenario, we're seeing phase 1 mein bik raha hai online in Gurgaon. Go into phase 1 stores, but go into select stores and observe.
Yeah.
Really observe who's buying your product, when are they buying it. Because what you need to eventually do is figure out which of these stores are not working and which stores should I improve my shelving in. So where should I pay extra to get a higher shelf space? Where should I be present or be able to provide potential offers? So we've got a venture that enables a lot of consumer brands called the New Shop. They're a retail 24/7 retail chain across India. They have multiple brands that have been a part of their stores, but from what my observation is, they're very select about. They don't have to have, if they have 100 brands that work with them, not all 100 brands are in every store of theirs. They've, in a very data segmented manner, put certain brands somewhere so that the relevant uptake takes place. That's very important for a brand to do if they're working with, let's say, a La Marche or a Food Hall or a Krishna Marsh, whatever it might be, or many general trade. They're more general trade stores anyway than modern trade, right? So be very mindful. And lastly, when you have the ability to have your own promoters out there, do a lot of auditing, because in offline it's very easy to be able to have unrealized uptake until collections take place or sale or return happens. And if return, because it's either sale or return, you're not going to get paid upfront in 99% of the cases, but your collections happen very late. So you don't want to be stuck with inventory there and your product is reaching expiry or your product hasn't happened, but in your last 3 months you're showing uptake. And that's where ventures have gone wavered out, because their revenues have never been the realized revenues they thought they would be.
Yeah. No, it's interesting to understand that even in offline, when you're going offline, you kind of you can go deep, but understand data by being there in front of the customer, and that improve shelving. I think that's absolutely important.
So
Yeah.
I'll give you an example of this.
Yeah.
When I had written my first book, so I'm talking about 2013. It was in a few bookstores. There's one I can now talk about, it's quite embarrassing, but in Galleria, and really nice bookstore. And I said, yeah, chal bhi raha hai, likh to diya hai, publish ho gaya hai. I got very lucky. But who's picking it up? So I used to go with a cap, very discreetly, at least so I thought, and just observe who's buying it. And then one day I said, okay, you know what, I'll buy it. And I bought it. And I saw, first I went to got to know from my publishers that how many books are there in this store. So they gave me, okay, there are 10 books in this store. I went on let's say a Monday. I saw 10 ke 10 पड़े हुए हैं. ठीक है. I went a week later. I said, चलो 6 पड़े हुए हैं. Then when I went, let's say the next day, I picked it up. This is the time when I was actually, I remember wearing a red cap, and I went and I said, I खरीद लेता हूँ, 5 हो जाएंगी यार. And I went to buy it, and I said, कैसा चल रहा है book? You heard from the person. Slow है, ठीक है, हाँ चल रहा है. नहीं नीचे पड़ा हुआ है ना, तो इसलिए लोगों को दिख नहीं रहा. कैसे लोग खरीद रहे हैं? So you can ask all the questions that you typically get online. नीचे पड़ा हुआ है means boost your ads, promote on Amazon. Same thing. Increase your shelving to eye level is boosting on Amazon. Audience doesn't come and buy it from here. It's in the wrong place. Get out of that marketplace. It could do better. It's too expensive. Discounting. See, everything that I'm saying is very relevant from online. It's the same world.
Yeah.
You've just gone into a different verse of it, right? And that's when I realized that when the guy looked and said he gave me data, we knew exactly how to sell and who to sell to, and that was exactly what I did for the next 3 books. And eventually I realized that if you're not listening to the seller, you will not know. You will that how important the consumer is. The seller is as important because now the seller is talking on your behalf and doing the job.
Yeah. No, that's very interesting. Sanil, we're almost towards the end of our conversation, and this is the last segment that we have, right? And I would like to largely focus on now how do we measure sales and take relevant actions based on early results. On that note, talk to us a bit about data-centric decision making. When should brands start investing in a data infrastructure? And maybe bring an expert on board to understand, their fund metrics like long-term LTV, CAC, all these kind of metrics. When should that happen?
You need to start tracking your data from your first sale,
Yeah, that's there. Yeah.
and you don't need an expert to do it.
Yeah, definitely.
That's as simple. I don't.
Yeah.
I think it's data can be your best friend.
Yeah.
If you start looking at it from day zero.
Yeah.
And it can be your biggest nightmare if you do not track it, because data is it's oil to your business. So track it from day zero, and you don't need any expert for it.
No, but then if you're building, say we are building an app also, right? There's an
Sure.
app ecosystem as well. Now for apps, say we have a mixed panel kind of a dashboard, that gives us a hell lot of data, right? Then the GA data comes in. Then say the Facebook data also comes in, and then you have to collate that data in order to give a holistic picture also,
Sure.
right? So how then obviously the founder, if he doesn't have, they
Yeah.
don't, yeah,
No, I okay. Yeah, so I think I stand corrected there, right? I think that's again a very subjective question and approach, because it goes down to founder capability. Sure, founder के पास capability नहीं है या time नहीं है,
time bhi nahi, yeah,
then there are enough and plenty of agencies. You onboard them now.
yeah,
I don't think there's a time period to it. It's a matter of capacity or capability. If you don't have the capacity, you don't have the capability, you appoint someone.
Yeah.
But when do you start? You start day zero, first sale. Collate it. Do not ever realize, you don't want to realize it later that you should have.
right. No, makes sense. No, so our agenda also to read this kind of data is to obviously understand the early signs of success, right? However, when would one know whether they have kind of achieved a PMF, which is an often scared term because no one understands what is PMF. What metrics do we track? Again, it's repeats, rising AOVs, maybe reviews, or a mix of all these. How can these metrics really differ also from a low frequency and a high frequency product standpoint?
I think we've concentrated a little bit on the PMF bit, so I think I'll try and go a little beyond everything we've discussed on
Yeah.
PMF to say that to figure out, after you've done everything to accelerate your journey, you have to now start figuring out where are you in your competitor landscape. Are you is your company synonymous with its product? When people think of your product, do they think of your category and they think of you? That happens through a lot of customer reviews, right? Figuring out how your customers talking about you, what's the review scenario, what your customer experience is. Maybe payment terms you're being able to negotiate. That's a big indicator.
Yeah.
Payment terms you can negotiate with distributors, with maybe certain online channels, a big indicator.
Big indicator.
How many brand associations are the brands wanting to do with you because they resonate with you? So I think these are indicators of growth, and after a while you've got to, sure, I've been saying you have to be, humble about the journey, but being humble and hungry can happen at the same time. You gotta be very hungry to say, now I'm here to exceed my competition. Now I'm going to, challenge them a little bit. In order to do that, you've got to look at your data and say that, okay, how do I ensure that I can further penetrate the wallet share now, or I can further engage with the audience, or distract them if needed, into realizing that maybe my product is more relevant. Yeah, I think these are all the key.
Makes sense. Makes sense. We'll be, closing this wonderful conversation, obviously, with one last question.
Sure.
And this is my favorite one, right?
Okay.
This is on pivots. So say, and again, pivots are painful, I see, but they're also wonderful because the early you understand it, the early everyone makes money as well, right? Say we understand after, looking at the data that we are moving in the wrong direction and the company needs to pivot. Talk to us about that experience around pivot where the investor is involved, the entrepreneur is involved. Is it the founders that come to you and say, "Yaar, chalo isko change karte hain kuch?" Like, what kind of conversations that you have when something is not working out from a VC and an entrepreneur standpoint? If you can, walk us through some of the anecdotes, that would be interesting.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good concluding question. See, pivots are inevitable. Or productization and growth horizontally or vertically into what you're building. If you're a consumer brand, B2B, consumer internet, doesn't matter. It is inevitable. It will happen. Who recognizes it is a matter of whether you're staying close to your data and realizing that something is not adding up, or I can leverage this. So looking at data and saying, no, we're not even tapping into 10% of our audience. And we can, not because we're greedy, because it's possible. So, when I look at experiences over there, first, who recognizes it? It could be an active investor will recognize it. An active investor will recognize it because they're always looking at the macros. They're sometimes looking at the macros and they have that bird's eye view before the founder does, because the founder's typically in the center, right, of the arena. So they don't know. Think of the investor as the goalkeeper in a football field. They can see the entire field, whereas the founder and the team is all the other 10 players. They're only manning their positions. So the goalkeeper's role as the investor is to say, okay, you can, penetrate and attack to the right. So ideally, it's our job.
Okay.
If the founder does it, great, and they do it a lot. Let's talk about it because they pivot. Let's take two scenarios: pivoting because it's an issue, productizing and pivoting because it's an opportunity. If they're pivoting because it's an issue, the journey first is, again, from a psychological point of view, making them realize, thank God you figured it out. Okay, good, bach gaye. Now, what happens after? You first have to evaluate, do you have the resources for that pivot? Goes back to team. Because a pivot is like a 0 to 1 going back to a 0 to 1. Like it's, chalo, you're back there. So is your team relevant? If your team's not relevant, how can we upskill? Do we need to add more? Then comes the journey of saying, what is available in our repository of resources, or in terms of sales already done, distribution that we have, access points we have, product we have, that we can adopt in the pivot. So the cost of pivot is less. First, you figure out these 3 layers, 2 to 3 layers. Then you figure out the cost of pivot. Does it come at an additional price? Is your runway jeopardized? Do you still have 15 to 18 months of runway? Do you have a lesser runway? Because you have to first, to honor a pivot, you have to then refuel a little bit.
Yeah.
I always advise founders, if you're doing that, you recognize it, do not go chasing exorbitant valuations just for the sake of it. It's a pivot. It'll probably do better for you. It's more important to ensure your business can sustain it and grow well from it. And then when you pivot, you're back, you're doing everything we've discussed from the 0 to 1. So it's no different. But now let's talk about the pivot when it's an opportunity. That's a very interesting opportunity that I've seen a few times. We have a company in our portfolio. They are in the HR tech space. If I have to give the larger thesis, it's a company called Huddle Up, and now they have a product called Typo.ai. Huddle Up is a product that has enabled companies to create employee engagement, employee retention, and also attrition prediction, which was a very interesting use case. But when they worked with so many corporates, and they've been working with startups as well as corporates in India and outside India, they realized that within the audience of their clients, their B2B, they can actually now cater to productivity as well. So they created a productivity DevOps. So now they're into the whole DevOps space, where they created this company called Typo within it. That was, one can say it's a pivot, but for me, it's productization. Productization that's still catering to the same audience pool.
Right.
Now, how did they do that? How did they do that was as simple as saying, we just knew what was the when we were looking at the experience from sitting where you are, we realized और क्या हो सकता है जो हमारे पास resources है, हमारे पास capabilities है, trust बन गया है. अगर trust बन गया, let's do it. Let's build it for them. And I think that's an interesting way of enabling pivots to also say that how does the brand go from what they were to where they are, and suddenly, if you look at the experience of, let's say, Shiprocket as a company, right, the products that they've been able to create over their journey are very different from when they first started to where they are now. And they've only been able to do it, create these pre-purchase, post-purchase, be an absolutely brilliant company for logistics, incredible venture providing warehousing, enabling brands. But their starting journey to now is maybe one of the several examples we've got of how, when you stay close to your consumer set of businesses, you can actually keep enabling for them.
Yeah.
Because a pivot, just to mention, a pivot when you're productizing is basically saying, telling your customers or your business, I got you. I know your pain point and I can do it for you.
Yeah, no, makes sense. What do you think about pivots during COVID, right? Because I've heard the most interesting stories of pivots during COVID times. Restaurants shutting down, then restaurant owners realizing that we have to make some kind of money. So, I've heard this story in the US where some restaurants, when they shut down, they consolidated all their inventory, understood what working capital that they have, created packaged food products from that. Now, that's an interesting story. What do you think about that? Have you seen any COVID pivot stories?
I saw a lot of businesses, both a lot of friends and a lot of businesses slow down during COVID to say that, okay, let's see how long this lasts. Let's see how this, how long can we sustain if we don't really go out there. I felt pivots that happened just during COVID, conventionally, I'm saying, typically were rushed because, businesses have come back. If COVID was an indicator that certain businesses shouldn't be doing what they're doing, the travel industry wouldn't be doing, I think, what it is doing much better than it was pre-COVID. So, I think I'm glad certain businesses were calmer and said, let's wait it out.
Yeah. Oh, lovely. Sanil, this has been a super interesting and insightful conversation.
Yeah, thank you.
I
Me
could
too.
very well, when you were talking, at least I could very well see your passion for supporting entrepreneurs, and that is why Huddle is what it is today.
Thank you.
I've absolutely no doubt that our listeners today will get a lot of insight from this conversation. Thank you for joining us for this podcast on Ground Zero. It has
Thank you.
been absolute pleasure hosting you.
No, this was great fun.
Yeah.
And I look forward to many more stories coming from you and glad to be a part of it.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you.